always gets in the way, doesn't it?
Cables.
All right.
Yes.
We're on?
Is it you or you're just
Yeah, no, he's the guinea pig. I'm the author, and we're gonna film me explaining, quote unquote. So
It'll take a lot of explaining for him to understand.
that's
so
what
you
I've heard. Yeah.
You better get started.
Well, the main thesis, although to be honest, there are a number of different things going on here. I would say these are the major themes, and I tried to tie these together in a way that's almost loops back to the beginning. So we go to awareness to language. Language obviously connects to affability and ineffability. Qualic mystery, which we apparently, as Raffman shows us, we don't really need. This is what Dennett has always asked for, is give me any evidence that qualia exist that doesn't presuppose that qualia exist. You know, give me a reason. And so then I go from that, of course, that is experience. I don't think attention is necessary for experience, and attention ties us back to awareness, which are, you know, of course at this conference was one of the main themes of awareness versus attention. What I, thanks to Chalmers' recommendation, I checked out Raffman's book, and what she shows is that and she just addresses musical pitch, and that's it. But what she shows is that we experience musical pitch as a completely, you might say, analog continuum. So I could start, oh, and go as high as I could possibly go, and have a completely smooth transition. However, and in the West, it's a 12-tone scale. There are other Eastern modalities, but it's always a limited number, say 15 maybe notes in a scale. So all of that infinitude of the spectrum of pitch, when we hear it, we sort of relatively, depending on whether it's tuned to say A440 concert pitch, A441, whatever, but as what we look at, we sort of snap to these digitized, if you will, as opposed to analog values, and then we say, well, that's a little flat for a B, that's a little sharp for a C. Now, it seems in theory, if we didn't have those, we might appreciate music completely across the spectrum, instead of saying, oh God, that's out of pitch, that sounds horrible. So we have this smoothness of actual experience, but then when we process that experience, we snap it into sort of categories. That's what Raffman said. That's her basic thesis. That's not mine. But what I then take from that and her arguments on pitch is I try to take it to everything else. So here we have textures and colors, the relative difference in these two purples. You would probably say they're both purple, or you might say one's violet and one's lavender. And also, there's slightly different softnesses. Now, my question, what I'm trying to do here, and I haven't had a whole lot of people even attempt it, but that's all right because I don't think it's actually possible. So if they got it right, I'd be in trouble. Is that there's no way you could write down everything there is about this experience of holding this or seeing it or everything that's bundled up in that, such that if I were to then read these notes tomorrow, having never seen these, I would know you were talking about this and not that.
That's right, that's right.
Now you can compare them. Yeah.
That's the component that language cannot capture, the analog, smooth.
Exactly, because what I would basically say is that language wouldn't work if it did that. If we actually had, yeah, exactly. There would be, if we had a word for every single infinitude of shades between these two purples, language would cease to be useful. The usefulness is in the sort of digital.
That's the ineffability of conscious experience.
Exactly.
Okay,
and
so I understand this one.
Exactly.
What about this?
Well, so now we have the source of ineffability, and now we can clearly say that there are ineffabilities involved in conscious experience, but I never presuppose qualia.
Right, so you don't need to assume that there are qualia in order to explain ineffability. You can have a different explanation that appeals just the language and how it works.
And that is possibly evidence for qualia, because that's what Dennett always says. Give me evidence for qualia that is not a presupposition. Is it evidence then? Well, Dennett is the one who came up with this definition from Quine and qualia. He said an essential property of qualia is ineffability. Well, we've proven that there is ineffability. I would say that's evidence that qualia actually are real.
It's not
maybe,
evidence
yeah.
for its existence, but it clears the way for getting evidence.
Right. It certainly doesn't rule it out, and we at least know that there is something ineffable about conscious experience.
That's right.
You could call that qualia or call it something else, but I mean, ultimately, what better word than qualia is there to describe what that difference would be, you know? Wouldn't you call it qualia?
So qualia becomes the conclusion instead of being the premise.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
very good. That's
Thank
very,
you.
very good.
And that's what
Alright,
Dennett's
so
been
last
asking
premise
for.
is,
Right, and this is where things get. This is the only thing that I've really had anybody other than a hardcore Dennett fan come at me with today. And this is right here. And basically, this may be my misunderstanding semantically of what's meant by attention. But what Raffman shows is that we can't remember these nuanced values. And that's why we cannot linguistically, verbally, whatever, communicate them. So if we can't remember them, we can't propositionally represent them, we can't verbalize them, I don't see how you could really meaningfully say we would attend to them. How can I be attending to something if I can't remember it, if I can't propositionally represent it?
Okay, so now I'll attend to this.
Right,
I'll attend to these two.
but you have no propositional representation of what you're attending. You have no memory of what you're attending, and you can't put in language what you're attending.
Right, but I am turning my attention onto this thing and the difference between these two things.
Sure, and in a sense, and this is why I would say it is controversial, and possibly it's just my misunderstanding of attention, but it seems like a very weak type of attention. That when people generally talk about attention, you would kind of assume, wouldn't you be able to remember what you were paying attention to?
all right, so
You
it's
know?
experience without strong type propositional attention. But
That
maybe
basically-
with attention.
I mean, certainly you could have an experience with attention. What I'm saying is that you definitely can have experience without attending to something, and
But I haven't been convinced
whether
of that.
yeah, and
I've
that
been
may
convinced of
not
these
be that may be something that is, again, as I say, sort of more of a semantic notion of, well, what does it mean to say attention? Again, to me, attention would imply that you would be able to remember it, that you could propositionally remember it, or propositionally represent it at the moment, even if you can't remember it, at the moment, right now. If I can't propositionally represent this, what's the attention? How would you say attention means anything if there's no propositional representation? That's where, and again, I don't know that it's the most convincing thing, but
Right.
it seems like a weak definition of attention to me that would say you don't
So
remember it.
if I look like this, don't you think that I can turn my attention now to my left hand and now to my right hand
Right.
without moving my eyes or anything else?
Yes.
Now, suppose I do this. And now I will turn my attention to the violet, and now I will turn my attention to the purple, also without moving my eyes. Looks like I can do something that's real and that is naturally called attention.
Yes, but this is my only way out of that is to take Raffman's musical example. So let's say that it was music, and I had a guitar that I was playing, and one of the strings was a little bit flat, and the B string was a little bit flat. Now, yes, I can turn my attention to the fact that as a B, qua B, it is flat. But I cannot turn my attention to the actual specific variance of its flatness. So what I'm attending to is more of the digital, as I was saying, or